All right, we are live. So thank you for everyone for tuning in. My name is Colin Evans. I am the news editor at the Temple News, and we are moderating a forum with the candidates from BloomTU who are running to serve on the executive branch of Temple student government. We are running it in conjunction with two other student media outlets who I will allow to introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Amelia Winger. I'm the news director at WHIP Radio.
Hello, my name is Victoria Lucas, and I'm a reporter for Temple Update, the student news broadcast at Temple University.
Great. So the way this debate is going to work is that BloomTU will have an opportunity to give a 2-minute opening statement, followed by questions that we are going to alternate asking. For each question, BloomTU will get 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. And after all the questions have been asked, we will give you another 2 minutes for a closing statement. Students are welcome to tweet questions. They will be tweeted to hashtag BloomTUForum 2020. So just use that hashtag and we will do our best to incorporate your question at the end. The Temple News will also be fact-checking the forum and will announce fact checks during the stream and on social media for anything that BloomTU says. BloomTU, do you understand the rules of the debate?
We do.
Great. So with that, if you guys want to start by giving your opening statement, you have 2 minutes.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Larisse Mejia. I am the candidate for Vice President of External Affairs with BloomTU, and I'm going to be giving the opening statement. So firstly, we want to thank Temple News, Temple Update, and WHIP Radio for hosting this forum and giving us the opportunity to expand on who we are as BloomTU and the platform which we plan to utilize to continue to advocate for students and jumpstart change and growth amongst the student body. Before anything, we want to genuinely thank BloomTU for their hard work as a campaign and for bringing light to issues they were passionate about in their platform, many of which we find to be very important, and hopefully in the future there is room for collaboration. We also want to acknowledge their concerns regarding the integrity of TSG and this campaign season. And while we may not share those sentiments, we understand their concern and can still appreciate how they advocated for their own campaign. As BloomTU, it is our mission to serve the student body to the best of our ability. We will provide an institutionalized voice to the student body through our innovative referendum system, advocate for the good of the student body and the world by championing divestment, and implement real accountability within Temple student government. We want to also emphasize that our platform is not an end-all be-all. We hope to use student feedback to prioritize the things we wish to accomplish, as well as change things on the basis of student feedback on what they find to be most important and necessary if we were to be entered. Nothing about this campaign season or even in this time period we're living right now has been normal, and we acknowledge that. And we want to be a support system to those who are struggling with this transition, as this hasn't been easy for anyone, but there are certain students who have been more affected than others, and we want to recognize that. All in all, we wish to support, advocate, and unite the student body, since now more than ever, this is what we need.
Great, thank you. And the first question. Yesterday, BloomTU suspended its executive team campaign, making several allegations of ethical misconduct by TSG members that they say provide BloomTU with an unfair advantage. Based on these allegations, do you think TSG was biased toward your team? Was this elections process fair?
So as we released in our press release, we understand those allegations and we understand that they felt there was a lack of integrity. We personally, as we described in our press release, we don't feel that there was any bias towards us, simply because we were provided the same amount of information. We had the same amount of contact with the elections commissioner, with the people that are in TSG and the administration. So that's why we feel there wasn't any bias. And also we feel that because of this, we didn't have a certain advantage. And so that's really all we can say.
I think you're muted, Colin.
Thank you. Sorry about that. BloomTU stated that one of the reasons they suspended their campaign was because they felt TSG was, quote, not readily available nor staffed to host an election during this time frame, ultimately resulting in an inadequate campaign period, end quote. BloomTU responded, saying that their campaign is evidence that both campaigns were given adequate time to prepare to, quote, properly handle the transition to an online election, end quote. Why do you, BloomTU, think it was best to hold the election at this time?
So the reason that we felt this election was best held at this time is because while this is a tough time, a lot of us had transitioned, a lot of us had to move off campus, we still felt that there should be an administration in place to voice the students' voices in whatever qualms they may have, whatever things they may need. Because if it was postponed to the fall, let's say, there wouldn't be a student administration in place, or the current administration would have had to extend their time, which I don't think that's allowed. And also, if we think about the fact that if an election or campaign season was held in the fall, by the time campaign season is gone through, by the time voting happens, by the time somebody's inaugurated and that team starts to build their whatever directors they have, but by the time they choose their people, the fall semester will be almost over, and then you really only have one semester to implement real change and to really act on your platform, which is why we really felt that it should have happened now as it did. We did advocate for a later starting period and a shorter campaign time, which did happen in the spring. There was a delay in the start date, and rather than 3 weeks of campaigning, it was roughly 2. So there was still some compromise in that, but this is really why we felt that they should have happened now and not in the fall.
So, in light of the concerns that were raised this week, how will you, BloomTU, ensure strong communication between all branches of TSG and between TSG and campaigns in the future?
I personally think that's a really good question. Communication is key, especially when you are working with 3 different branches in the government. So I think just working alongside both the parliament as well as the ethics board as the executive, just making sure that communication is going through to whatever campaigns come up, and not even just in campaigns. Like I said, communication is key. So that is something that we would make sure happens at all levels.
Gotcha. And moving on to issues surrounding the coronavirus, what has the university, in your view, done well during this time, and what could be improved about its response to COVID-19?
When it comes to talking about the COVID situation as well as how the university is handling, I believe Temple was actually in a really good spot for students in thinking about the transition to online learning. Some areas of improvement I think the university could work on are simply just the conversations around like graduation or pass fail, or partially refunding the university fees charge. I think the conversations could be held a little bit more transparent so that students know how those conversations are going, as well as what they can kind of expect for the future, even if they don't come to a decision at the forefront.
Great. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague with Temple Update.
Thank you, Colin. And continuing the conversation with the topic of COVID-19, how can you ensure that you have connected with enough students during your campaign after the university closed campus and moved to remote instruction?
I think no matter how technological we are and how technologically savvy our generation is, obviously word of mouth is always the thing that we would prefer. We would prefer to have that face-to-face interaction, but that's something that we weren't granted given the circumstances. So I think the way that we still were able to reach students is obviously through our social media, through our Twitter. We tried to be present on all social media platforms that people may have. We would post interactive stories. People could ask questions. They obviously were able to tune in the previous debate. And then on our posts, we would also encourage people to check out our platform, to interact with us. We would have takeovers where people would be able to talk with people more and more of a real time. So we definitely gave students the opportunity to provide feedback, to interact with us in that sense. And we will always make ourselves personally available. So I know for us, like whenever something would be posted on Bloom, I would repost it and be like, you can even reach out to me personally. It doesn't just have to be our official accounts. So I think we just did the best that we could. We also reached out to orgs, informing them if you want to set up a time for us to talk, just so we can get to meet each other and you can get to know us, we can do that as well. So we just tried to really take advantage of any resource that we could have.
Okay, thank you. And how are you advocating for an in-person commencement ceremony for the class of 2020? Do you see any other alternatives, of cases of COVID-19 continuing to rise?
So this is a really good question. It's something that we've taken pretty seriously the past few days. I'm sure everyone saw the graduation video that we had go up, where we interviewed different seniors to make sure that their voices were being heard about how much an in-person commencement means to them. In terms of conversations that we've been having outside of that to make sure that action is being taken, I've reached out to people within the administration currently just to make sure that we introduced ourselves and the fact that this is a pressing issue that if our administration is to be elected, we will be pressing forward with and advocating for the student body with. On top of that, something that we've talked about internally that isn't completely locked away, but something that we think is feasible is repurposing part of Becoming TU's platform that they weren't able to execute because of COVID, which was Founders Day, which was meant to be a day of celebration for the campus and its values and stuff along those lines, and repurposing it in the fall for the class of 2020. Regarding if cases could spike up in the fall, that's something that we're going to have to play by ear and continue to advocate for the student body as we go with. That's another reason why it's so important for the student government election to happen now, right? Because if cases did spike up again and we pushed off the election for the fall, then there would be no one there to advocate. So we're here listening to the student body, and as issues arise, we're going to continue to be as transparent and accountable to the student body as we humanly can.
Thank you. And our last question for Temple Update, how specifically do you plan on strengthening the relationship between Temple and the surrounding community?
So when it comes to community relations, I think we can all say that we're in a unique position as Temple University, seeing as though we're right in the middle of North Philadelphia. And there's constant expansion going on, so that one way we want to say like we're anti-stadium, and we think this is a way to strengthen the relationship with the community, because if you listen to the community members, this is not something that they are for. This could cause noise pollution, construction, it could raise rent prices, so we want to start with that. But I think the main way that we plan to strengthen our relationship is collaborating with local organizations. So there's already Philadelphia-based communities that are made to serve the Philadelphia community, and there's specific ones in North Philly. So we think that if we collaborate with these organizations, maybe co-host programs on campus that we can invite community members to, that's a different physical interaction that we really haven't had at Temple University, I would say, that could really strengthen our relationship in a different way. And I think maybe even creating mentorship programs with these organizations that maybe focus on higher education paths, and even involving the College of Education in that. I think there's a lot of things that we haven't explored, and these are things that we're willing to do the research and implement during our term.
Okay, thank you. And for now, I will pass it on to my colleague from WHIP, Amelia Winger.
Thank you, Victoria. So continuing in that same vein, in your platform, you state that you want to facilitate communication between community members and Temple students by collaborating with local organizations. Which local organizations are you going to connect with?
So when we were creating our platform, I kind of took the reign on this point, and I was looking into one organization is called Project Home, and they do a lot with home insecurity. They do a lot of workshops with like debunking certain myths around homelessness or like housing insecurity. They do other trainings, they do other programs that they host. So I thought this was an organization that might be good to work with, just because we try to address food and housing insecurity on our own campus, so why not collaborate? And I think we could learn a lot from them, and I think this is something that could serve both the North Philadelphia community, but also Temple students. And then another organization that I found is called the North Philadelphia Project, and they do a lot through education. So they have a mentorship program with like the students or the kids in the North Philadelphia area. So this is when the idea of involving the College of Education came in, because student teachers or peer teachers, or even any Temple student could really we can try to connect them to be volunteers and be mentors in that way, so that we have that access to the kids in North Philly and we can build better relationships with them and their families. We did want to reach out. I wanted to reach out with them to see like if this is happening, kind of introduce ourselves to see if this would be possible for the next year. But with everything that happened with COVID, I didn't think it was appropriate to do that right now. So that's why we didn't really go forward in that sense. But we did do some research on who we want to collaborate with.
And how specifically will you work with the substance use education and harm reduction group to help students in recovery? Do you plan on working with any other recovery groups?
That's a really good question. And the reason why we included that in our platform is essentially, we believe the university could do a little bit more when it comes to substance use disorders. And so we want to work with the universities or even with the substance use education and harm reduction work group in figuring out what kind of resources can we bring to campus for students who are experiencing substance use. And so I think that is what we are aiming to do. We just want to make the resources more available to students so that in the case that we do lose another student to substance use, we are being a little bit proactive about the situation, just due to the fact that we are trying to bring more resources to campus.
And the current TSG administration advocated for creating various programs open to both Temple students and community members, such as group fitness days. These were not well attended by community members. In continuing these initiatives, how will you improve the community's ability to attend and access Temple facilitated resources?
I think when it comes to those initiatives, and I think we first need to establish like kind of like a basic level of a relationship, I would say. So I think just really getting to know the community members, like knowing some of their names, knowing some of the history behind them, like how long have you lived in North Philadelphia? I think establishing more of a foundational level relationship with community members, and first getting them to attend, so that and getting them to attend like town halls or different programs that we do host, where they can advocate for how they feel in Temple University, the things that are important to them. And I think once we form a stronger relationship in that regard, then we can continue to implement group fitness days or things that are a bit more lighthearted, or things that we can get to know people on a different level. But I think first we need to do what I mentioned first, like just really showing them that we are here to listen and that we are passionate about their input. And I think from then, if they really sense that from us, then they'll be more willing to participate in any other initiatives that we do.
Great. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague at the Temple News, Colin Evans.
Hello. The next question is, how would you ensure that food resources are visible and accessible to all Temple students?
Thank you for that question. When it comes to food and housing insecurity, that is something that I'm super passionate about. Having been a volunteer at the Cherry Pantry for the past 2 years, I think in talking about how can we make sure food resources are available to students and at the forefront, so making sure students know where to go, is just making sure that the Cherry Pantry is supported in the sense that we are assisting them in getting donations and making sure students have adequate amount of food to get from the pantry. I realized that one of the problems with the Cherry Pantry is essentially that there is just not enough resources for the amount of students that we are seeing. One week that I was there, we saw almost 150 to 180 different students for the week. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of students for the Cherry Pantry. And so I think when it comes to, again, food resources, just making sure that the charity pantry is supported and making sure that they're getting donations.
Gotcha. You have advocated BloomTU for creating a referendum system to help expand the capacity of student voices to be heard by TSG and Temple's administration. How will you ensure all students are heard and not just students who are engaged with Temple student government?
I think that's a really good question. One thing that we were talking about as a team is thinking about student engagement. And so a student referendum system would essentially give more power to students to speak on the issues that arise for a student referendum, which again is just essentially just a legitimized petition, so that data could be used to the university when we are talking to the university about the problems that students are facing. So I think student referendum systems would be a good way to engage the student body, whether that means just completing the referendum or even going to learn about what the referendum is for.
And I would also add that in terms of engaging people who aren't already engaged with TSG, I think a lot of it is just like taking the personal responsibility of whoever is in administration and encouraging whoever does do the referendum or whoever takes part to really spread the word and share it with their friends, and just us taking the initiative of reaching out to people who we know may not be as engaged, but saying like, hey, we think this might be useful, or like, what do you think about this? So I think a lot of it is just taking your personal responsibility and really just spreading the word about any resources that may have, because I think a lot of times we tend to say like, there's not a voice or there's nobody advocating for me, but sometimes there is. We're just it needs to be more clear and more available to people. So that's definitely something that we're going to take upon our own responsible and even in our own personal time to do.
And finally, Quinn said in the last debate that your campaign would be taking a more, quote, hands-off approach to Parliament if elected. Could you clarify what that means?
Thank you for that. Parliament's a really important topic that needs to be discussed. So by hands-off approach, we simply meant Parliament is its own organization outside of the executive, right? And every year we sort of looked at campaigns and the way that they tried to meddle in Parliament's operations and decided that that might not be the best approach for us to take, and it hasn't necessarily been successful in the past. So something that we're looking to do is make sure that right off of the bat, we're out there supporting Parliament members, making sure that the relationship between the exec and directors that come into place have those foundational relationships with those in Parliament. And then from there, letting them figure out how best to bolster Parliament as their own entity with our support, rather than us telling them how they can best fix themselves. Something that's really important is the low number of Parliament members running already for the current positions. So something right off the bat that we would of course want to be working with them on is just making sure that those positions are getting filled up as soon as they can, so that students' voices are being heard directly through Parliament members.
And with that, I will pass the baton off to Victoria from Temple Update.
Thank you, Colin. So unfortunately, last week, a video surfaced on social media of a Temple student using racial slurs. How will you address racism and discrimination within the student body? And also, how will you advocate for students experiencing racism and discrimination?
I think right off the bat, we want to say that we don't accept racism, any type of hate speech, anything that would really make anybody feel less than. So we want to say that out front. And I think things that we would do are just really advocating that stance, and also encouraging the Temple administration to be more transparent about what does go on when these incidents happen, because it's not the first time that this has happened on campus. And a lot of times as students, we hear from administration, oh, we don't tolerate this. This is something we don't accept. Action will be taken, but we're never informed as to what. And so I think if they were just more transparent on what that actually looks like. And I know that a press release that the current administration put out is also revising the student code of conduct to be more explicit on what goes on when bias-related incidents happen. And I think that's something that we stand for as well, as much as can that I think as much as can be written in a policy that that should be possible. And I think that should be done. And I think the way we would advocate for anybody who's affected by any type of hate speech is just really pointing them to the resources that we have on campus, saying that we're allies with them. This isn't something that we tolerate, and providing a listening ear. And I think just giving them the platform to kind of speak for themselves, and also giving them the room to advocate how they think that students, or when they're affected by this, what things should be happening. Because I think a lot of times we try to speak for others, but we should kind of give them that room to do it for themselves as well. So these are just some of the ways that we would plan to address this if it were to occur again.
Okay, thank you. And how will you advocate for Temple students to the administration and the Board of Trustees? Did you all hear my question?
Can you
Go for it. No, I heard it. Yeah. So something that we obviously, that's a very broad question. Advocating for students goes across all of our platform points. In particular, regarding to the Board of Trustees, something that we've taken on within our platform is fossil fuel divestment, which we've talked about an awful lot over these past few weeks, but I'm just going to bring it up again because we can't talk about it enough. Just because establishing a good relationship with the Board of Trustees off the bat is very important in order to get the ball rolling on this issue, making sure that we're not advertising this as something that we're planning to work against the Board of Trustees on. It's something that really, at the end of the day, there needs to be collaboration and open communication between the two parties on. So as president, that's something that I plan on doing, working to make sure that our student government administration has a very good, strong working relationship with the Board of Trustees right from the get-go.
Okay, thank you. And to the vice presidential candidate, what is the first thing you want to accomplish if elected?
I will take the lead on this one. I believe that one of the first things I want to accomplish is to implement the initiative tracker. The initiative tracker is essentially just a document that would be open to students and any other community member who wants to see what Temple student government is up to. That document would be updated when the actions are being taken on the initiatives, so that students know what the administration is actually up to. And another thing that I really like about the initiative tracker, it will point out any roadblocks to students that we are running into, so that we can continue advocating and trying to figure out how we can implement the various platform points that we brought up on our platform.
And I think, speaking for myself, I've talked a lot about community relations, because I would say it's like one of the things I'm most passionate about. And when we were creating the platform, I had a lot of ideas. So I think something that I would want to accomplish pretty soon is that establishing those relationships with local organizations and really starting to make headway with that. I think that's something that would be at the forefront of my own agenda if I were VP. And I think another thing under our sexual assault prevention and awareness is the Safe Bar certification. I think that's something that hasn't really been mentioned before our campaign came along, and I think that's something that could be really beneficial. And I think that's something that's possible to do within the first semester. So I think those two things will really just boost the morale within the community, but also for Temple students and their safety.
Okay, thank you for that. And now I will pass the baton to my colleague from WHIP, Amelia Winger.
Thank you, Victoria. So, what relationships do you plan on forming to increase housing availability for those facing housing insecurity?
So when it comes to housing insecurity and the relationships that we're building with Temple administration, one thing that we are passionate about is just increasing both the visibility and the availability of these resources for students, just because we just feel like the university doesn't, not to promote it, but I feel like students don't understand where to go when they are facing housing insecurity.
Great. And what makes you fit, all of you fit, to lead the student body and not use these positions as resume builders?
I would say what I think would make me fit is the fact that I'm passionate about this. I'm the type of person, I don't like to have to do things. If I'm not 100% behind something, I will not do it. It's just part of my character. It's who I am. So when I was joining Bloom, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of demands too. I was like, I'm not an unorganized person. I don't like overnights. I don't pull all-nighters. So I need this to be organized and I want us to be on top of things. And that's something that I didn't even have to fight with because we were very organized in the way we did things. We were proactive. We listened. So I think just the way that I've approached this, I've been very passionate, I've been very vocal, and I think that's something that I can bring to Temple student government. And I think something that makes me fit is that I don't have any ties in Temple student government. I was never involved before, and I think that's something that's unique, and I think having an outside perspective coming in, I think that kind of provide something to Temple administration that isn't always there. And so this is why I would say that I'm fit for this position, but I think that's also something that I can't really determine all by myself. It's like also part of the perception of how people deem me and how they feel I work in these environments.
Also, going off of Larissa's point about not having TSG experience, I think that is a really beneficial kind of aspect to our position in coming into TSG. I myself have served in many other student support roles, such as being a resident assistant, working with the Cherry Pantry, working on OWL team. So not only do we not have, speaking for myself, not only do I not have Temple student government experience, but I have a lot of experience in understanding what students' needs and wants are, and I'm willing to advocate for those needs.
So balancing that out, I think my TSG experience largely plays off of their inexperience with TSG to provide a sort of universal perspective. So our team as a whole knows the ins and outs of TSG and the external perspective of those looking in without experience. Continuing that, echoing sentiments that both Mark and Larry shared about just work ethic and different positions within the campus community already, from OWL team to Temple Sleep Out to Camp Kesem. So yep, that's why I would say that I'm qualified for this.
Great. I'm going to pass it back to Colin now.
Great, thank you, Amelia. It is known that BloomTU is against the construction of an on-campus stadium. Could you specifically elaborate on how you are going to advocate against the construction of a stadium?
I think a lot of it is just continuing to advocate that this is not something that we want. I know a survey was done a couple years ago that found that a lot of Temple students and a lot of community members did not want a stadium. And I think that's something that we could do again, just to show that this still is a relevant issue and it's still something that students aren't advocating for. It's something that won't really help the community. We have a long history of gentrification, and I don't think we need to further push that agenda. We're already a big enough campus as it is. We have a lot of construction going on campus with Anderson and Gladfelter. There's always something being done to Fox. So I just don't think that we need to continue to allocate resources to continue expanding when we don't really have to, when we have a stadium that is already functioning and does what it needs to do. So I think it's just revamping the data, putting it back out there, getting more opinions, and I think maybe even creating a formal proposal. I think that could be helpful as well to present to the administration, because I think that'll show just how serious we are.
And could you expand on whether you would align yourself with anti-stadium groups such as the Stadium Stompers?
I personally don't know who they are, so I can't fully say if I align completely with them, as I don't know much about them.
Okay. And how will you improve your relationship with the organization Women Organized Against Rape?
No, thank you for that question. We actually spoke to a Temple student who interns with Women Organized Against Rape, who stated that the best way to build that relationship is educating students on their resources, and also just pushing those resources and advertising them for students to know what WAR is actually providing students as an external resources resource at Temple.
And I think to build off that, it would probably look like a full out social media campaign where we would present all of WAR's resources and also the different programs they have. They have group sessions, they have solo sessions that people can go to if they need any type of support. And I think even including them in Sexual Assault Prevention Week, I think that's something that could look cool as well, or just promoting them on campus and having collaborations with them. So from based off what we spoke with that intern with, a lot of it is just advocacy and making it visible. And that's really how we plan to approach it.
Great. And we have a couple of questions submitted from students. The first question is from Jonathan Atienza. He's Parliament's representative for Disability Resources and Services. And his question is, here in Philadelphia, the city addressed some accessibility issues before last November's elections. Billy Penn reported that Philadelphia polls were 100% accessible to people with limited mobility. Polling places were installed and they added ramps and wedge mats to smooth paths and added doorstops. However, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported this wasn't done to address accessibility. It was necessary to install new state-mandated voting machines. With your proposal to create an on-campus polling place, will it be accessible for Temple students with physical disabilities on Temple's campus? And will you be able to get a polling place on Temple's campus by the end of the academic school year in 2021?
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for submitting this question. Really important. So first off, right off the bat, accessibility is one of the main points that I've already had preliminary conversations with a lot of administrators about. Chris Carey, Associate Dean of Students, Phil Smith, Director of Student Activities, people within the administration that I've been getting the ball rolling on this initiative with. That's one of the first things that we've talked about. It's very important. On top of that, regarding the feasibility by the end of the 2021 school year, I'm optimistic that it can be done. The last conversation that I had was after a meeting with the Office of Government Affairs and the city commissioners, where they said that there were some requirements that we would need to investigate and look into. But if we meet those requirements, we should be able to establish a location on Temple's campus as a auxiliary election office for the upcoming fall presidential election. This obviously could shift depending on what the election looks like this year if we do reorient ourselves towards mail-in ballot systems. But again, we're here to be adaptable to the student body's needs. So if we need to campaign on getting the word out regarding mail-in ballots, that's something that we are prepared to do as well.
Great. And this question also comes from Jonathan regarding specifically your platform point to create a director of accessibility position. When will you guys be creating that position? What are the steps and processes for creating the position? And how will this benefit and be helpful for Temple students connected with DRS?
So based off of last year, when BloomTU was able to establish a director of student basic needs, this is something that we would be able to do for the current coming administration, hopefully, and something that would be in place for the 2020 to 2021 school year. In terms of how this would be beneficial for the student body, as Jonathan is well aware, Parliament does have a DRS representative, and this would provide an executive counterpart that could work alongside them, collaborate with them towards executing initiatives in an even faster, even more efficient manner than before.
Great, that's the end of our student questions, so I'm going to pass this off to my colleague Victoria for closing statements.
Okay, thank you, Colin. So first, I would like to say thank you so much to BloomTU for making yourselves available today for the conversation. I would like to say thank you to the Temple News, WHIP, and also Temple Update. I think that it's important to enforce and provide an outreach for students and their concerns, especially through this unprecedented time. And I think regardless of views, we did that today. I think we did. And a huge thank you to Temple Student Government. And thank you to all of you. And if there is anything else you guys would like to mention? Anything?
Yes, we do have
2 minutes for your closing statements.
Yeah.
Awesome. To begin, again, we want to thank Temple News, Temple Update, and WHIP Radio for hosting this forum, further allowing BloomTU to talk about who we are as a team and how we look forward to serving the student body. We also want to thank ListenTU for their hard work this campaign season. And although concerns were raised about the integrity of TSG and the elections, we would like to reiterate that while we do not share the same sentiments, we understand their concerns and also want the election to be fair. Lastly, I want to thank the student body who have taken the time to tune into today's forum and that have followed the campaign for the past 2 weeks, given that it's been conducted virtually. As a campaign, BloomTU's primary focus is to grow the student body's voice. Our pillars and platform have been created with that intention in mind. Through our pillars, Elevate, Thrive, and Empower, we aim to communicate to everyone that we are here to do more than the minimum, and we want to reach for more and create initiatives that can go beyond just one TSG administration. Our platform is directly fueled by our pillars, which is why our campaign made sure to touch on a variety of areas that affect students. In trying times such as these, it is our obligation to advocate for both the platform we have created prior to this pandemic and for the needs of the student body that have arisen due to COVID-19. With that in mind, you can count on BloomTU to ensure that student sentiments are being recognized by the administration as they navigate various decisions, such as a postponed in-person commencement. Temple community, as we all know it, perseverance conquers. Stay safe and stay healthy. We will get through this together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to all of you. And if that is all for this evening, have a great night and stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, you too.